Well, hi everybody. Welcome to the show. As I always say during the beginning few seconds of these live streams, if you are with me in the live chat and you have a question that you want me to address during the show, please hold on to it until I turn to the live chat after I answer some Patreon questions. And I will get to you, hopefully not right at the end of the show, but after I've answered some patron questions first. So hi to everybody in the chat, and actually, Radical Bacon, I'm sorry to hear that. I saw that you were going to be part of Ollie's stream. I was going to mention that at the beginning here. For those of you who don't know, and I'm sorry that apparently the large cast was causing issues. If you don't know yet, PhilosophyTube is doing a live stream on Twitch. I think it's just twitch.tv/PhilosophyTube is the address. And he is doing a live read of every work of William Shakespeare in a marathon live stream to raise money for charity. I think he's raising money for the Samaritans over there in the UK. So I will not be offended. It will not hurt my feelings at all if you feel the need to go and watch Ollie on Twitch instead of watching this show here, because believe me, he's a great guy and it's for a good cause. And I just wanted to mention that in case anybody is watching and didn't know. So please take that into consideration. Yes, and if you're in the live chat, Radical Bacon just posted the link in the chat. So thank you very much. Now, let me turn to some questions that were submitted by my wonderful Patreon patrons. And I will answer them, and then I will turn back to the live chat. So everybody, and look at that. He has raised over $18,000 so far, which is amazing. So yeah, that's a great cause and a wonderful thing. So anyway, if you have not, or if you have a question waiting for me to answer it in the live chat, or especially if you were planning on being generous and donating a super chat or something, please hold on to it until later in the show when I'm actually paying full attention to the live chat, because I'm now going to turn away from the live chat and let's see about some pre-submitted questions submitted by my Patreon patrons. The first one is from Blue Eyeshadow is Logical, who says, "Tell us the story of how you met your wife." I don't take orders. That wasn't a question. That was you were telling me to do something. I don't take commands from you. No, I'm kidding. Okay, it's my wife and I have known each other. We actually we met in high school when I was a senior and she was a freshman, but we weren't really close. We knew each other, but we weren't really like close friends. Actually, her sister was in the same class as me. And we were kind of friends. Like, we didn't really know each other all that. We weren't like super close or anything, but we, knew each other and were friendly with each other and liked each other. But I didn't know Ashley real well while we were in school together. And then we ran into each other years later. We actually were both at the grocery store at the same time. She was there with her mother, and I was there with my grandmother. I would take my grandmother to go grocery shopping, and we sort of bumped into each other there, and we chatted each other up and talked about, hey, how have you been? How have you been? How's so and so? Blah blah blah. And after that, we kind of stayed in touch. She wrote me an email, and we started meeting and hanging out, and one thing led to another, and now here we are, 15 years later. Wow. 15 years later. So yeah, that's basically, in broad strokes, that's the story of how I met my wife. Next question is from David Colby. HeMan continues under Kevin Smith. So why do you think all those chuds who say they hate the new She-Ra are being very vague about why exactly She-Ra is a travesty? Surely it cannot be because they know they'll sound like bigots, pedophiles, or racists if they say what they don't like about it. What do you want to see most in the new He-Man? I personally want to see Skeletor being exactly the same as he is in the 80s show. I want my flamboyant, sassamatic, skeletal snarker. Boy, so do I. I try to manage expectations with things like this. I honestly, hearing that there would be a new He-Man series and that it will apparently pick up where the original Masters of the Universe cartoon left off, and that it is being shepherded, showrun, produced, whatever, by Kevin Smith. All of that was a huge surprise to me. I hadn't heard anything about that. I hadn't seen that coming at all. So this is all sort of, I'm still sort of fresh on this. I'm still sort of like, whoa, okay, wow, a new He-Man show, and Kevin Smith is doing it, and it's like a sequel to the original show, and oh, Jesus. So there's a lot. I hope that it maintains, at least to a point, the kind of goofy tone and aesthetic of the original series. I have said before, when the subject of He-Man has come up, that I personally believe that the key to that show's success is the fact that Prince Adam and He-Man look exactly alike, and no one ever suspects that they are the same person. Like, to me, that is absolutely crucial to the success of that show, and I would hope that that is maintained. I would hope that the ridiculously implausible yet somehow completely unquestioned secret identity of Prince Adam and He-Man is maintained. But I don't know. I haven't seen character designs. I don't know what it's going to look like, anything. But I hope that is the case. And I hope it has kind of a light, breezy, sort of goofy tone. And I agree with you about Skeletor. If Skeletor doesn't call King Randor a royal boob at least once during the run of the series, I will be a little disappointed. My mind is open. I'm willing to accept what they give us and to judge it on its own merits. But if I don't hear "you King Randor, you royal boob" at least once, I'm going to be a little crestfallen. I'll be honest with you. Next question is from Kizzy. Thanks for the comment you made last time about being a trans ally. Saf was really touched by it. Question this time. Have you read any beta canon books for Star Trek? I love Voyager, so I have read them all. Just finished Architects of Infinity by Kirsten Bayer today. I've also read some other books that tied in with the Voyager arc, like when Janeway becomes the Borg Queen. Any thoughts on the books? Not really. I haven't. I think I've answered a question like this a few weeks ago. I haven't read any of the recent novels. I read some of the novels, the Next Gen novels, in the 90s when I was a kid, when Next Gen was still on and then Deep Space Nine was still on. I remember I read Reunion, which I think is by Michael Jan Friedman. And I read Imzadi by Peter David, and I read Federation by Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens, and a few other ones maybe too that I'm having a hard time remembering. But I haven't read any of the recent ones. I haven't read any of the relaunch ones that they did, a couple years ago. It's been now 5 or 6 years ago probably, when they did the big novel relaunch, and they said this is going to be like season 8 of Deep Space Nine, and this is going to be the continuation of the prime timeline after the movies, and et cetera, et cetera. I haven't read any of those, so I don't know. I've read some of the Shatnerverse novels, which acknowledge events in the other books, but also kind of go off on their own and go off in their own directions. So through them, I'm kind of dimly aware of plot things and what the status quo is, but I don't really know a whole lot about it. And I like the Shatner novels because they are absolutely bonkers. Like, there's just, they're so out there that I don't think even the other novels acknowledge them. Like, they're sort of in their own pocket continuity. They're not even considered canon by the non-canonical novels. That's how out there they are. But I really enjoy them. But other than that, no, I haven't read the novels too many. Next question is from John Burnsy. Recently, I saw an article about a female teacher who punched a Nazi and was arrested for it. Previously, many of the punching a Nazi incidents didn't lead to arrests, perhaps because the punchee wasn't interested in pressing charges. And I wish they would, because I loved Samuel L. Jackson in A Time to Kill responding to Kevin Spacey's question, and then there's a link to the video if you want to watch it. If you're proud enough to follow through with the go punch a Nazi adage, then own it. Hell, don't use the victim as an excuse. Use your action as a source of pride. Demand your day in court. And if you're 5'4" like me and the Nazi is a 6'6" Hulk-like individual, play that up. Yes, punching a Nazi is against the law. Being proud of it isn't. So be prepared to go all the way. Agree or disagree? Well, of course. Yes, I agree. I mean, look, punching anybody, unless it is a clear-cut instance of self-defense, is against the law. And I agree with that. I think it's a good law. That I think punching people ought to be against the law. But I also have no moral objection whatsoever to anybody punching a Nazi or a Klansman or anyone who is a white supremacist, someone who is an agent of intolerance and oppression and hatred. Like, I'm just never going to shed any tears. As I've said many times, when something shitty happens to a shitty person, my response is not to feel sympathy for the shitty person. My response is to go, oh, good, and if I knew the person who did the punching, I might offer to, buy him a beer or a Coke or whatever they want. So yeah, but yes, if you do punch a Nazi, which I think is a completely morally acceptable thing to do. But if you do it, yes, you should be prepared to face the legal consequences. And hopefully you will be able to, to pay the legal costs, or have someone who will come in and help you pay the legal costs. I mean, when you have to, I think you always have to think twice, especially if you are a working class person or a person living in poverty for whom the legal fees will be a burden and potentially a catastrophic burden. I think you always need to think twice about whether or not you want to put yourself in a situation where you will be put into that system. But if that's a risk you're willing to take, if that's a burden you are able to take on or are willing to take on, yeah, I mean, you need to be ready for that. You need to keep that in mind, and you need to be willing to follow through on that. To me, it's not just a point of pride. It's a point of practicality. Yes, absolutely. There is no moral. I have no moral objection to somebody punching a Nazi at all. But they are, if the Nazi decides to press charges, if they find themselves in court as a result of punching them, then they need to be ready for that. And, that doesn't mean it's anything to be ashamed of, because I agree with you, it's not. But that is something that you have to be prepared to reckon with. Next question is from Isaiah Taylor. Hey, Steve, my topic is today about a self-coined term that I have come up with while studying the behaviors of liberals and millennials, being that I'm a liberal. Yet I've noticed a lot of liberals who complain about capitalism and equality and yet embrace those same concepts in order to maintain some sort of social advantages, cliques above others. A mod liberal is someone who espouses liberal viewpoints, typically obvious anti-discrimination sentiments such as protection of gay rights, protection of ethnic and religious minorities, and the environment, and heavy critiques of capitalism and social inequality, yet are highly consumerist and condescending to those who do not fit their social profile, being poor and not in the know. Mod liberals only agree with culturally liberal ideas in order to fit in and appear cool. Their economic critiques of capitalism are situational, i.e. the drug war, the war economy, and the prison economy, opposed to capitalism as a whole, as MLs secretly support capitalism as long as it benefits them. Your thoughts? P.S. I'm auditioning for American Idol Friday morning, so wish me luck. And I'm thinking about writing about the story as in which the Borg act like emos. By the way, much shorter this time. Thank you from iBorg. Yes, it was a lot shorter this time, Isaiah, but I still did truncate it a little bit. I hope you don't mind that I edited it down even a little bit more from your version. But I think I preserved the essence of your question. Yeah, I think moderate liberal or mod liberal is a good term. I mean, you're certainly describing something that is a real phenomenon. I mean, the smartass in me says, well, there's already a word for that. They're called Democrats, but then I am a Democrat, so I don't want to I don't want to shit too eagerly on Democrats because I am a registered Democrat. But a lot of Democratic politicians, especially a lot of sort of mainstream establishment Democrats, I think would fit the description that you are putting with your term mod lib or moderate liberal, because yes, their critiques of capitalism are extremely situational. They want, for the most part, to preserve the capitalist system that we have, but just to reform it to such a degree that there's less exploitation and there's less inequality. But someone who is further to the left than that, like our friend Some Random Geek, would say that that's not enough. That reforming capitalism is not sufficient, that we have to completely get rid of that system and start fresh with something that is more equitable from the ground up, instead of trying to tweak a system that is inherently rife for corruption and exploitation. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good term, and I think the term describes is certainly real and certainly something that people should be aware of. And you're right, people are motivated by their own selfish needs and desires. And one of those desires that I think all of us have to one degree or another, regardless of how we try to be aware of it and correct it, is we want to be viewed as a successful person. We want to be viewed as a worthy person, as a good person, as a smart person. And sometimes chasing that can cause us to forget about certain other principles that maybe are more important or should be more important to us. So you might be the type of person who would say, who would rail against the excesses, and corruption and exploitations of capitalism, but you'd be completely fine with other parts of it that might disadvantage other people, but are actually an advantage to you. So yeah, I think that's something that happens, and it's something that we should be aware of. Like I said, I think there are probably terms for that already. Democrat. I was kind of joking, but I do think a lot of Democrats fall under that category. But yeah, it's a good term, and it's a good category to be aware of. Next question is from Zathras2. As a UK citizen and someone that agrees mostly with your political commentaries and with everything you've ever said about Star Trek, I was wondering what your view is on what UK politicians would call the special relationship between the US and the UK, both in the past and, given our Brexit woes, what it might mean to your current administration in the immediate future. I do get the feeling that most U.S. citizens, understandably, have less than a passing interest in the U.K., yet such a big deal is made of U.S.-UK relations on my side of the pond. Thoughts? Sorry, that's more than one question. Well, but they're kind of related, so I guess I'll let it slide. We call it the special relationship over here too. We just we don't talk about it nearly as much. I take from your question and from other UK residents that I know that it's a much bigger deal over there than it is over here. But we're still, we have the term special relationship over here too, and there is definitely a perception that the UK is first among allies for us, is sort of our best friend in on the world stage. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good for our two countries to have close relations. I think it's good for two of the most powerful and influential nations on the planet to have that kind of relationship, to have that kind of friendship. I think it's reassuring that those kinds of allegiances can exist in the world between separate states, separate countries. So, I think overall it's a good thing. And I think the main reason why it's not treated as being as big of a deal over here as over there is that, and I know that Britain, the British Empire, has a history of this as well. Maybe you have grown more humble over the years, but here in the United States, we're still pretty goddamn full of ourselves. And the main reason why we don't talk as much about our close special relationship with the UK is because we're spending most of our time talking about how great we are and how exceptional we are and how awesome we are in every way. And that leaves precious little time to talk up our allies, even an ally that is as close and as important to us as the UK. So I think it's a lot. It's probably the relative excess of American conceit and arrogance and self-centeredness as opposed to the UK, which now that it is sort of in a post-colonial, post-imperial period, relative to how it was in the past when they said the sun never sets on the British Empire. Maybe there's a little tiny bit more modesty in the British national self-image than there is in the American self-image. And I'm sure there are some British folks watching this who are laughing their heads off right now because they think of their country as being just as arrogant and self-centered as I think mine is. But I'm just talking about, calling it as I see it. I certainly don't have nearly as good of an impression, nearly as complete of an opinion about how the political culture and how the sort of the national ego of the UK is as someone who actually lives there would have. But that's the impression I get. Next question is from Dr. Babylon. Israel isn't Judaism. Being an ally to Israel isn't the same thing as being an ally to Jewish Americans, and criticizing the Israeli government or the Israeli lobby isn't the same thing as being anti-Semitic. On a recent Fox and Friends segment, one of the hosts mentioned how the majority of American Jewish support goes to Democratic candidates, even though, quote, George Bush and this president have been better allies to Israel. Trump recently said that Jewish Americans who vote Democrat show either a total lack of knowledge or great disloyalty, as though Jewish Americans owe their allegiance to the state of Israel. Thoughts? Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say, I'll put in a little tiny caveat here, which is, even though I agree with you 100% that criticism of Israel and especially criticism of the government of Israel, the present administration in charge of Israel, is certainly not analogous to anti-Semitism. There are anti-Semites who try to smuggle their anti-Semitism in beneath a facade of criticizing the state of Israel or criticizing the government of Israel. So it's not as if there's no cause for concern there. But having said that, yes, I agree with you 100% that there is no reason why a Jewish person necessarily owes the government of Israel or the state of Israel their unquestioning loyalty. I mean, look, I don't think Americans owe the United States their unquestioning loyalty. I think if you truly love your country, being critical of your country, being critical of your country's present government, and being willing to call it out when your government makes mistakes or does something that... Just a second, the cat tried to get in. Being willing to call that out when your government makes mistakes is something that a patriotic person ought to do. And a Jewish person should be, whether they live in Israel or have ever been to Israel or give any kind of a shit about Israel or not, they should have the right to be critical of the state of Israel, of its politics, of its policies, of its government, without being considered disloyal or uninformed. And a non-Jewish person should be able to make those same critiques as well. And if they are doing it in a way that is not anti-Semitic, which is entirely possible, then they should not be charged with anti-Semitism just for critiquing the state of Israel or the present government of the state of Israel. I agree with you completely. And I have to imagine that for a lot of Jewish folks, the issue of Israel has got to be kind of frustrating, because Israel to Jewish people seems to me analogous to reproductive rights for women or immigration for Latinx people, because it seems like those are the issues that are always addressed whenever a politician or a political group is trying to reach out to that particular demographic. If you want women to know that you're on their side and they can trust you and they can vote for you, then you automatically talk about abortion rights. And it's not that abortion rights aren't important, especially now in this day and age with how threatened they are in the United States. It's an incredibly important issue. Reproductive rights are an incredibly important issue that people should be talking about. But that's not the only issue that women care about. You know, immigration, same thing, an urgent issue, something that we should all be deeply concerned about. But Latinx people don't just care about immigration. And I feel like with Jewish people, it's Israel. And if you want Jewish people to vote for you, let them know that you're a strong ally with Israel. And that's important to a lot of Jewish people, but there's also a lot of Jewish people who don't give a shit, or who actually would love us to be, yes, sure, let's be allies to Israel, but let's be critical of Israel. Let's hold them to account. Let's not just rubber stamp anything they do. You know, the issue is more complex than that. And I imagine it has to sound more than a little patronizing to a lot of Jewish Americans when any time a political party or a candidate is trying to build a bridge to them, they always lead with, here's what I think about Israel, as though that's the only thing that a Jewish voter would possibly care about. I imagine that's got to be kind of frustrating at times. Next question is from Wellington Marcus, who says, Shira question. Okay, so the gem on the Sword of Protection is a runestone. All the known runestones come from Etheria. The Eternians, first ones, came to Etheria to study magic. The Sword of Protection is from Eternia. Ahem. Did the first one steal the runestone that is in the Sword of Protection from Etheria? Did the Etherians give it to the first ones? How did it get to Eternia to be made into a sword? I don't know. I guess that hasn't been specifically answered in the show, so we are left to speculate. I guess somebody stole it. You can't trust those Eternians. You know, there are a few good ones, okay? There are a few Eternians that are good people, I'm sure, I assume. But a lot of them, you know, they come here to Etheria and they're not sending their best people. They're sending their runestone thieves and their magic students who overstay their magic student visas and end up living off of our public benefits, and they're just. I would just, you know what? I just think we should look. I don't mind them coming, okay? I don't mind them coming, but I want them to come through authorized portals so we can keep track of who's coming in and we know who's here. And that's it. And if they commit a crime while they're here, they have to know they're going right back through the portal. That's all I'm saying. I don't have anything against those people. Anyway, I decided instead of really answering the question, I would put on a little play, and I hope you enjoyed it. The next question is from M. Greenwood. Hi, Steve. I recently had a health scare that involved a trip to the ER in the middle of a workday. I'm fine, but it's making me take my health a lot more seriously. I'd like to move forward. I like to move toward a more plant-based diet to cut down on the fat and general junk that I tend to eat. You're the only vegetarian I know. Can you recommend some easy-to-prepare lunch options? I have to leave at 5:30 a.m. for work, so I usually pack lunch the night before, as I am a zombie until about 6. Thanks. Have a great week. Well, sure, I would be happy to recommend some things to you. I eat a lot of salad, so if you are a salad eater, I would recommend making yourself the night before, or whenever you're packing your lunch, make yourself a nice big salad. Maybe do some experimentation, figure out what kind of greens you really like. The salads I usually make, I make it with a combination of romaine lettuce and iceberg lettuce and spinach, and it could be either mature spinach or baby spinach. It doesn't make a difference to me. Maybe some low-fat Caesar dressing or some other kind of low-fat dressing. Maybe a little bit of cheese, a little bit of low-fat cheese, and lots of salt. Or for me, it's imitation salt because I'm watching my blood pressure. And fresh ground pepper, and just kind of mix that all up. And that to me is delicious. Maybe throw in some mushrooms if you want a little bit of protein. Mushrooms aren't as good of a source of protein as meat, but it's better than nothing. And the spinach is a good source of protein too. So, a good salad is an option, and make sure you make a lot of it, because for me personally, a little tiny bit of salad isn't really very filling. I have to make myself a really big salad, and then just consume it. And that's a good meal for me. Also, you might consider making some rice dishes. Again, just experimentation. Maybe cook up a nice big pot of rice. Maybe throw in some vegetables, eat fresh. Dice up some fresh vegetables, or just get a bag of frozen vegetables, like some frozen stir-fry vegetables out of the freezer section of the supermarket, and just throw them in with the rice and cook it all up. And that is just delicious. I could eat rice and vegetables every day of the week and never get sick of it. And it keeps really well too. You can make a whole bunch of it at once and keep it in the refrigerator, and it'll keep for days and days and days. So you can just sort of dip into it and to pack your lunch. So those are sort of the two main suggestions I would make as far as lunch. I would also recommend, if you haven't done this already, and you probably have, but if you haven't, cut soda out as much as possible. If you for beverages, for drinks, just drink tea or water, or something like a carbonated water, like a seltzer water that doesn't have any sugar or salt added to it. That'll really make a big difference. But yeah, and just figure out what works for your palate and what works for your schedule. But yeah, if you're asking me, I would recommend look into coming up with a good salad that you like, that you can stand to eat, and that'll fill you up, and maybe some rice dishes, that you can add some flavor to in a healthy way. That'll be good too. Next is from Lynn Simpson. Hi, Steve. I came for the Star Trek, but stayed for all the other intelligent things you have to say. So glad I found your channel. My question is about impeachment. I have no doubts about the pretender's guilt on many counts, and would like nothing better than to have him thrown into a bottomless pit where we never have to hear from him again. Given that won't happen with the repugs in control of the Senate, do you think it would be counterproductive for the Dems to pursue impeachment? Thanks for all you do. No, I don't think it would be counterproductive to pursue impeachment. I think the Democrats should be pursuing impeachment, and I think finally they are over 2 years into this. They're finally starting to seriously pursue impeachment, and I'm very, very glad to see that. I think it's way overdue, and I still think they should be doing more than they're doing, but at least they're doing something. I don't view impeachment as a political issue. I view impeachment as a legal issue and a moral issue. This president is unfit. This president is unfit in more ways than I can enumerate. This president is dangerous. This president is bigoted. This president is corrupt. This president is incompetent. This president is dishonest. This president is, in all likelihood, a criminal several times over. This president needs to be removed. And if the Democratic Party wants to have any integrity or any credibility with the people in this next election or the election after that or the election after that, they need to be able to say, we held this guy to account, even if the impeachment doesn't result in removal from office. Because as you say, as long as the Republicans control the Senate, that's a non-starter. The Democrats can vote to impeach him in the House. The Republicans still have to go along with it to get enough votes to convict him in the Senate and remove him from office. And that's just not going to happen. That's just not going to happen because the Republicans don't care. They're lining up behind Trump, and there's not enough of them with enough of a conscience or a spine to do anything about it. So it's politically, it's a non-starter. But the Democrats need to be able to say that they did their job. They need to be able to say, look, we did what we were supposed to do. We saw what was happening. We saw who this man was. We saw what this administration was doing. And we did what we were supposed to do. The Republicans didn't. The Republicans enabled him and carried his water and shielded him with every ounce of power that they had and every ounce of energy that they could muster. The Republicans they compounded and enabled and added to his crimes. We did what we were supposed to do. So that's what I think needs to happen. And yeah, and now, look, when people say, but it'll give Trump a talking point and it could get him reelected, like, I'm not oblivious to that. That is a risk. But, you know, I've long since reconciled myself to the probability that the only real justice that Trump and his cronies will ever face will be the judgment of history. Like, I would love to see that not be the case. I would love to see him impeached. I would love to see him arrested and tried in a criminal court and convicted. I would love to see that. I don't think I'm going to get that. I think the only true judgment of the Trump administration and of Trump himself will be the judgment of history, of the children of my generation and their children, and on and on. And the same people who judge Trump will also judge the people who had the power to stop him or to try to stop him and did nothing and made excuses for why they were doing nothing. Those people are going to be judged by the same people that are going to judge Trump. And if I were in that situation, I would want to act in such a way that the judgment of history would look kindly on me and would say, you know what, when the chips were down and he had his moment to do something, he at least tried to do something. And there are way too many Democrats in office now who don't seem to care about that, who are more concerned with running some kind of triangulation to try and figure out how they can win the next election, which I'm not saying is unimportant. It's very important. But they seem completely fine with, you know, future generations looking back on them and saying, look at what these cowards allowed to happen, and they didn't even try to stop it. So, yeah, I think they should be pursuing impeachment wholeheartedly and with great vigor. Next question is from Andrew C. Hawkins. Do you ever get burnt out from doing the Facepalm 5 videos? Do you have a method for dealing with outrage? I found that I had to weed all of the political and news feeds out of my Facebook and be mindful of the hour of the day when I check the news because the outrage was getting to be too much for me. There have been more than a few videos that showed up in my YouTube subscriptions that I've put off watching for the same reason. Sure, of course. Actually, I just wrote a video script today for what's going to be my video next week, my Wednesday video, that deals with this subject a little bit. I can sympathize with people who say that they're burnt out, you know, who say that sometimes it gets to be too much and they have to just step away for a bit. Like I get that entirely. That makes perfect sense to me. And yeah, sometimes it gets to me too. Look, I made a video about the recent mass shootings, and that reflected my true feelings. You know, there are the gun violence issue, for whatever reason, is one of those things that every time a mass shooting happens, especially if it's a particularly horrific one with victims in the double digits, I do feel a sense of despair. I do feel a sense of hopelessness. I feel a sense of like this is never going to change. We're never going to fix this. Not enough people even want to fix it. There's no point to this. This is fucked, and it's always going to be fucked, and there's nothing we can do about it. So I can relate to anybody feeling that way about the world, about not wanting to watch the news. There are times I think I think it might have been the Dayton shooting. When I got a notification about it on my phone, my phone buzzed and I looked at it and it was another mass shooting, and I had like a physical response. I just went like, oh, I just and I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to read it. I didn't want to deal with it. I thought, no, this again, God, I don't want this. I don't want this to be happening. I don't want to have to deal with this. And yeah, I mean, when I have to step away, when I have to do something not related to that, to clear my head or to settle down or to sort of cheer myself up. Yeah, I mean, I watch Star Trek. I go for a walk. I work on something else. Like I might work on YouTube stuff, but I work on something not related to the political stuff or the news related stuff. Talk to a friend about whatever. Play with my cat. Like there are things that I do that sort of can allow me to step away for a time and kind of recharge and then come back. So yeah, I don't know if I would ever say that I'm burned out. But it does get to me. Yeah. From time to time, it does get to me. And I do have to step back and take care of myself. And I do. I don't want anybody to worry about me. Sometimes, actually, it's cute and it's very endearing, and I really love it and appreciate it. Sometimes I will perform my frustration for a video, and even if I do it as a gag, if I do it on a Star Trek video and I do a scene where like I'm pulling my hair out and I'm losing it and I'm kind of going off on a rant or having what appears to be an emotional breakdown. And believe me, I have emotions I can call on to do that. Like that's all there's a root of that is 100% real and genuine, even if I am playing it up for the sake of a video. Like it's all completely real. But people will ask like, Steve, are you okay? And I'm okay. Like I've got it under control. For the most part, I am not a miserable, depressed person. I've got a lid on it, and no, I don't feel burned out or exhausted or ready to quit or depressed or anything as a result of all this. It does get to me from time to time, but I have ways of dealing with it. So thank you for your concern. Next question is from General Contact Unit Problem Child. You know how some media franchises go on indefinitely because companies can keep making money from fan loyalty? In a post-scarcity space communist world, that wouldn't necessarily happen because what art gets created wouldn't be determined by profitability. Would there be downsides to that? Like, I don't know if I like the idea that a director could just make the first two movies in a trilogy and then just be like, you know what? I don't find this fulfilling anymore. I'm going to go do something else. And then they just can because they don't have to worry about going bankrupt or getting sued by a studio if they abandon a popular franchise. Well, the thing is, this kind of thing happens already. There are already instances where to take movies as an example, like a director or a writer that started a franchise or started a series decides to leave before that series has concluded, and other people come in and take over. And sometimes the results are good and sometimes the results are bad. But it happens already. It happens, and the results depend on the particular instance that we're talking about. The only difference in the kind of society that you're talking about in like a post-scarcity economy where money isn't an issue anymore, and also presumably where intellectual property isn't as much of an issue, is that it would be easier for artists who are unfulfilled to do that, and they wouldn't be penalized. If a director of a movie decided, I don't want to make another one of these, they wouldn't have to worry about facing financial ruin or hiring an expensive lawyer in order to be able to get out of it. And I don't see how there's a downside to that. I mean, there might be a downside for us as the audience. We might say, but I want James Gunn to make another one, I want him to do Guardians 3 and Guardians 4. I want him to keep making them forever, right? But that's kind of selfish on our part. I mean, I feel like the artist deserves some freedom, and the artist deserves the artist's debt to the audience only goes so far. I'll put it that way. I do think an artist should have a good relationship with the audience. I do think an artist should feel some sense of responsibility to the audience, but I also think that only goes so far. And, just because you've made two really popular movies, let's say, and you just don't have a third one in you, and the audience says, no, make a third one. Like, you as the artist should be able to say, you know what? I'm not going to do this. Like, this isn't what I want anymore. I think you should have that right, even if it will piss the audience off. Next question is from Matthew Rick. Is a preposition an okay thing to end a sentence by? I see what you did there. Kristen Shaw's character in the sadly missed canceled TV series The Last Man on Earth would definitely have a problem with that, because she made a very funny point of never ending a sentence on a preposition. But I personally have no problem with it whatsoever, because as someone who is educated in English, I can tell you that English, like all languages, is a living, breathing organism. And the rules and syntax of English give it a structure and make it comprehensible to us, but by no means should they limit our expression or stop the growth and evolution of the language. So ending a sentence with a preposition, while it may technically be bad grammar, you can do so and still make yourself understood. And really, isn't that the main purpose of a language? I think so. That's, and I'm pretty sure that every single one of my linguist friends agrees with me, because I no longer speak to the ones that don't. Here's another one from Villa Lade. What's your take on the moral issues of DS9's In the Pale Moonlight? And not just in the episode itself. For example, Sisko's attitudes to Section 31 seem a tad self-righteous when compared to what he was ready to live with. Well, the nice thing, and it's coffee, by the way, because people are always interested in what I'm drinking. The nice thing about Deep Space Nine is that it is a good enough show that we can take some confidence in assuming that the complexities of Sisko's character in that way are the result of good writing, and they're just not the accidental consequences of lazy writing, which is sometimes the case. I think Sisko is a complicated character, and I think that is for the most part intentional on behalf of the writers who created him. And I think from Sisko's point of view, it might make sense for him to have been willing to go beyond the boundaries of the law and beyond his moral principles in the Pale Moonlight to collaborate with Gareth and to do those very dark deeds in order to realize a greater good of bringing the Romulans into the war against the Dominion, and for him to also take a dim view of Section 31, because Sisko is ultimately willing to take responsibility for what he does in the Pale Moonlight on himself. He's saying, I can live with it. He's saying, what I did was wrong. What I did should not be acceptable under normal circumstances. I lied. I cheated. I bribed men to cover the crimes of other men. I am an accessory to murder. He's not saying that these things should be okay. He's saying he did those things and he owns them and he can live with it because the end result was a greater good for the Federation and for the war. So he can believe that and think that and still say that Section 31 is a bad thing, or be suspicious of Section 31, or not be thrilled that there is a department of Starfleet that is dedicated to doing the sorts of things that he did and now has to live with. You know what I mean? Like I feel like you can have both opinions without being a hypocrite, because he's not saying that what he did was good, and he's not saying that other people should do the thing that he did. He's saying he did the thing that he did because it was necessary and he can live with it. That doesn't mean that he would look at Section 31 and say, oh, they're doing the same kind of shit. Good for them. Best of luck, everybody. Like he could still look at that and say, I don't like that. I think that's a bad idea. I think that's beneath us. I think that violates our principles, right? Because he violated their principles. He's willing to own it and live with it, but he still accepts that he violated the principles of Starfleet or his own moral principles by doing those things. So I don't think that's as contradictory as, at least from Sisko's point of view, I don't think that's as contradictory as it might seem at first. Next question is from Grumpy Otter. Well, I just watched the Star Trek Economy Responses video, so I'll ask what popped into my mind then. Were you kidding about really liking The Last Jedi? Have you not seen the interviews with Mark Hamill where it is clear he was devastated by what Johnson did to Luke? Not an attack here, LOL, just trying to find out if you meant it or if you were trolling us. I meant every word of it. I love The Last Jedi. I sincerely, earnestly, no irony, no sarcasm, think The Last Jedi is a great Star Wars movie. I think it's probably my second favorite Star Wars movie after The Empire Strikes Back. And I genuinely love the treatment of Luke. I think Luke's storyline in The Last Jedi is wonderful, is so satisfying, is very moving and dramatic. And yes, I am aware of what Mark Hamill has said in interviews. I love Mark Hamill. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a terrific actor. I think he's a wonderful presence on social media. I have nothing but admiration and adoration for Mark Hamill. But a lot of his complaints they're actors' complaints, right? They're understandable from his point of view, but they're actors' complaints. He's upset that Luke didn't have more of a role in all three films. He's upset that Luke was relegated to the final scene, really the final shot almost, in Force Awakens. He's upset that Luke was largely sidelined in The Last Jedi and then was apparently killed off, so therefore he won't have as big of a role, if any, in the third movie. So, and he wanted more of a presence for Luke in the movies. And I think the idea he said was, give Harrison the first one, give Carrie the second one, and then I'll take the third one as Luke. That the third one will be my movie. And that's not how it worked out. And he disagreed about that. And he also, was upset that he didn't have any scenes with Harrison after, Harrison left after the first movie and Luke and Han didn't have any scenes together. And now, barring some, completely unforeseen chain of events in the movies and a lot of retconning or rewriting, they won't. Like there will be no more Luke and Han scenes. There will be no more Mark Hamill and Harrison scenes in a Star Wars movie. And Mark was upset about that and disappointed. And I completely understand that, and I completely sympathize with that. If I had the experience that those three actors had of making the original Star Wars trilogy together, and then they heard that they were getting back together and they were doing 3 more movies and they were reprising these characters, and then Mark Hamill finds out that he's not going to get any scenes with his old buddy Harrison Ford, and we're not going to see Luke and Han together on screen, I completely get why he would be upset by that. I completely get that. But that doesn't change the fact that I think the way they wrote Luke in that movie was fantastic, and I think that movie was fantastic. And I promise you I am not kidding about that, and I am not trolling about that. Next question is from Ahoy Yerno. With your love of Star Trek / wars, I assume you're at least aware of the Warhammer 40k or Battletech universes. Based on miniature war games, they're a lot less utopian. In the grim darkness of the far future, there's only war. Do you like Tyrannids? What's your clan or house? Blood for the Blood God? Locust? Or Urban Mech? I have a black computer. My computer is black and shiny. I am aware of the existence of Warhammer and Battletech. That is it. I know nothing else about them. I've never played them. I've never read about them or looked into them. I have never had the least bit of interest or anything other than just a very dimly dawning awareness of their existences. So I actually, thanks to your question, I actually know more about them than I think I ever have before. Actually, you know what? There might have been a question. Somebody might have asked a question about Warhammer on this show a few weeks or months ago, and it had a lot of info in there about it. And I don't remember anything they said. So, sorry. Next question is from Jamie J. As a vegan and an intersectional feminist, I often struggle with how colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism impact veganism. On the one hand, I really genuinely would like to see everyone be vegan and for no undue harm to come to any animals. On the other hand, I see capitalists profiting off this by exploiting agricultural societies and destroying their way of life, i.e. quinoa farming. I also see a great deal of meat manufacturers producing and selling meat analogs, creating a system which isn't really replacing meat farming with more environmentally friendly and animal-respecting alternatives so much as supplementing the profits gained from meat production. In addition, as a white person living on land stolen through genocide from peoples who very often participated in the eating of animals, I very much do not see it as my place to enforce my cultural and political notions of morality upon victims of the imperialism and colonialism from which I have benefited. Do you ever face difficulties reconciling conflicts within different kinds of moral values like this? If so, could you share some examples or experiences of your own and how you try and lead the best life you are able despite said conflicts? Well, I mean, I can't really offer any profound insight or any secret to how it's done. All I can say is I try to figure out each situation as it comes, you know, and I try not to get paralyzed by the many different conflicts, you know, because you're right. There are situations, and you described a lot of them beautifully. You described a lot of the moral predicament of a privileged person living in the West and the many different concerns that you need to have if you want to be an aware, informed, conscientious person, right? That are just always in the air. You have to be aware of all of those things. But if you are hyper aware of them at all times and you're constantly grappling with, okay, what do I do about this? And in light of this, should I do this or this? Eventually, like you're just gonna be trapped. You're gonna be paralyzed. You're not gonna be able to do anything. Or no matter what you do decide to do, you're gonna feel terrible about yourself because you realize that in a lot of situations there is no moral choice. There's only a more moral and less moral choice, or a series of choices on a spectrum of morality. And some things are more moral and some things are less moral. That's our situation. So I try to make the most moral choice that I can make in a given situation. I don't always succeed. And in all honesty, I don't always consider it as carefully or as thoroughly as I should. There are times when I do make decisions that are driven more by my own selfishness and my own love of comfort or convenience than by principle. There are a lot of times when that happens, and I'm not proud of that, and I try to do better with that, but that's just the way it is. But if I sifted through the finer points of morality for every decision I had to make, I don't think I would be able to exist. I don't think I would be able to do anything. So a lot of it, unfortunately, in the interest of just being able to function, a lot of it is being willing to sort of put things on the shelf. As hard as that can be philosophically and morally and even emotionally, like you can feel terrible about that. You have to be able to say, you know, I can't worry about this right now. You know, I can't factor this in right now because if I do, there is no moral choice. There's nothing for me to do here. If I want to do the right thing, there is no right thing. There's just a series of greater and lesser wrongs, you know. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I love The Good Place so much, because The Good Place actually not only acknowledges that, but does it in a way that is incredibly funny and also deeply human. You know, it's what makes The Good Place such a great show, is that it acknowledges and grapples with these questions and does it in a way that is just incredibly entertaining and satisfying. But yeah, I mean, I wish I could tell you what my secret was, but I don't have a secret. I just try to muddle through as best as I can. And sometimes I feel really shitty. And sometimes I let myself off the hook, probably more often than I should. Next question is from Nathaniel Robinson. Hi, Steve. I loved your video on Star Trek economics. At the very least, I'm putting those books on my reading list for the future. More importantly, the video game The video gave me hope that the global economy has enough give that the problems humanity faces of the next few decades can be addressed without causing severe suffering in and of itself. However, I have to point out that Star Trek never addresses an important component of its economics: the psychological maturation or cultural shifts required to support such economic values. There is a huge gap between Kirk declaring that people don't use money in the future and Picard lecturing Offenhouse that we have evolved beyond the need to use money as a tool or vehicle for power. That seems to be a problem on two counts. First, not knowing the story of human emotional evolution, whether cultural or psychological, makes it difficult to judge whether the economics is really in our future or just a device of science fiction. Second, it employs conservative constructs. The process of evolving into the economy of the future is always relegated to the past, and few details are known about it. It reminds me of the ways in which Mitch McConnell remembers and celebrates emancipation and the civil rights movement. They were big achievements. We're not going to talk about who was on what side, and we're moving on. I think this is a problem for Star Trek as a roadmap, not just a sci-fi universe, because it's not clear that the abuses associated with capitalism don't themselves evolve. Indeed, there were plenty of Jeremy Benthams who thought that industry and capitalism were themselves the perfect paths to eliminating scarcity and want. Thoughts? Yeah, and I love the Jeremy Bentham reference. Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, I think it's one of the shortcomings, one of the limitations, let's say, of using something like Star Trek to try and draw a roadmap to the future. I think Star Trek is most useful in being aspirational, not necessarily in being instructional. Star Trek and the creators of Star Trek have not given us a set of instructions for how to get from the world we have to the world depicted in Star Trek. Probably because they're not capable of doing that. Like they lack the knowledge and expertise to draw us that map. They can give us the picture of what it would be like. And then we can decide, first of all, the most important decision, which is, do we want that? And is that something that is important enough to us that we will put the work in to try and figure out how to get there? That's where Star Trek, I think, is really useful, because it gives us the inspiration. It tells us, you know what, this actually is possible, or something like this is possible. There is some real world analog of this that we could achieve eventually if we really, really wanted to and we worked hard at it. So I think that I don't necessarily take credit away from Star Trek for not giving us any specifics as to how it was achieved. The point about how human beings have evolved is a good one, because actually, I think even more so than the economic aspect of it and you know, how did we get from here to there, I think the concept of the evolved 23rd, 24th century human is basically a conceit. And the main reason I say that is most human characters in Star Trek shows don't behave all that differently from contemporary humans. Have you noticed that? I mean, they are certainly different in a lot of important ways. We see very little in the way of bigotry and prejudice from human characters, and even human characters that exhibit prejudice toward non-human species. That's presented as unusual. You know, it's not something that is a widely held belief. So humanity has evolved beyond bigotry, or at least beyond open, identifiable bigotry. And that's a big thing. But in terms of personalities, in terms of motivations and likes and dislikes, and you know, they behave a lot like contemporary humans. And I think that's a joke that I've made a few times on the Ensign's log, and I've never put too fine a point on it. I'll just drop a line like this in and let it pass, and hope that maybe somebody will catch up on it, because you know, the characters that Jason and I play in the Ensign's log are supposedly two of those evolved 23rd century people that live on the Enterprise and have overcome the barbarity of 20th and 21st century humans. But if you listen to the show, we're totally not. Like, we're bags of neuroses and insecurity and biases and selfishness and prejudices and irrational fears, and we're not evolved in that way at all. But every once in a while, one of us will say, "Oh, come on now, we're evolved 23rd century humans." Which to me is funny because clearly we're not. And clearly most of the human characters in Star Trek are not. We're told they are. We accept it because it's a conceit. It's part of the premise. But in actuality, if you judge purely by the behavior and the depictions of the human characters on Star Trek shows, it doesn't really seem to be the case. I mean, even someone like Captain Picard. Picard is probably the best example of that. Picard seems to be a fairly evolved human. But even he isn't so different from a modern human. You know what I mean? It's not impossible to imagine a modern human who is at least who is at least reminiscent of Picard. I don't know if there will ever be someone who is as morally praiseworthy as Picard, who is as upstanding as Picard. But it's not impossible to imagine someone who is kind of like Picard. Not Picard, but in the ballpark, maybe. He's not that alien to our modern sensibility, but he's probably the best example of a character who actually is shown to walk the walk of evolved future human, as opposed to someone like Riker, who seems like a really good dude. Seems like a really good, upstanding, principled dude, but also in many ways is completely indistinguishable from a 21st century person. Next question is from some random geek. Steve, I just wanted to highlight a comment left on your comment response video on Wednesday from the user named Renato Corvaro. Actually, I had a janitor that worked at my elementary school. One day I learned that he had won the lottery some years ago and was set for life. Turned out he just liked being a janitor, and it gave him something to do during the day. Mic drop. Noam Chomsky has said he is not convinced that there aren't enough people in society to do all of the necessary jobs to help run a fully socialist society, even the quote-unquote crappy jobs. Out of the 3.5 million homeless people, a lot would love the opportunity to do some work, I bet. And if there are some jobs that no one wants to do, the technology hasn't advanced to the point where no one needs to do those jobs, resources aren't put in to advance that technology, maybe because it is not profitable. But I constantly hear it, even from other patrons of yours. Where's the incentive or motivation to work? People need the money incentive to do a good job. To which I have to respond with, I guess it's a good thing every parent is paid very well to raise their kids. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it unless money is involved. Oh, wait, they aren't paid. Just a measly tax break, not as big as a corporate tax break. In fact, it is the unpaid labor that more often women do that is part of the reason for the wage gap and the earning gap. I guess there's more incentive to do work other than money. Personally, I would love to get paid more than I do now, but that is only because I have charged my credit card close to the limit just to help our comrades like Joanna, who always needs money since she can't work. I also help out our comrade Phoenix of the channel Phoenix Rising 87, who did find a place to stay, and I have given her $350 for the first deposit. But everything still costs money. She and the rest of our comrades could still use help. Charity links below. I also would want more money just because of rising rent prices too. Fuck private property. Since there is proof that people can and do work without the money incentive, how can we convince everyone an economy like Star Trek is possible today? It is just that the people with the power to do so, i.e. money and capital, would rather go to space or Mars instead of helping to reverse climate change. The world is on fucking fire. A reminder of Earth Strike. On September 27th, everyone go to www.earth-strike.com for more details. How can we convince everyone that money isn't necessary to run a society? Yes, Steve, you know I will do my part by feeding you and your audience anarchist thought in 500-word intervals every 2 weeks. Later, potential comrade Steve. I think you've hit on it there with there are already examples in our lives as they exist now of times when we are motivated by things other than money. Parenting is a great example. Unpaid labor of various kinds, which you rightly point out is disproportionately done by women, is a great example. And also, just what about something just like people who have a hobby? Doesn't anybody have a hobby and you don't get paid for it? You don't earn any money for it. In fact, it's probably a drain on your finances. It costs you money rather than making you money. And it's still important to you. You still enjoy doing it. right? You still want to do a good job, and maybe not even a hobby, maybe just something that you do for other people. Like I remember my grandfather, when he was alive, used to sharpen knives for people. You know, like if you had like a kitchen knife that was dull, like he would take it, and he did this for family, and he did it like for friends and acquaintances too. Like if you had a dull knife that you wanted sharpened, and you wanted someone who knew how to do it, and you didn't want to have to pay to have it professionally sharpened, Pap knew how to do that and was really good at it, and he would just do that for people. He never got paid for it. He never asked for any money for it. And he always tried to do a good job, because why would you volunteer to do something if you're just going to half-ass it and do a shitty job at it? Like, he took pride in it. It meant something to him to, if someone is trusting you to do this job for them that you have asked to do for them, or told them you are willing to do for them, then you want to do a good job. And the act of doing it obviously gave him some enjoyment, or gave him some meaning to his life, because otherwise he wouldn't have done it. He didn't make any money from it. He did it because he liked helping people, you know? And, you know, people who collect stamps, people who collect baseball cards, people who paint or draw or write for their own pleasure, not to sell it or to get published or to get an agent or to have an exhibition or whatever. People, not that there's anything wrong with doing it for any of those reasons, but a lot of people just do it for their own pleasure. They do it as a hobby, and they want to get better at it. They read and they study and they practice, and they do it constantly every day because they want to get better at it. Not because they're making any money at it, because they want to. You know, so yeah, I mean, there are instances in life already where there is motivation that is not a money incentive. So I think most of the people who say that, who left comments like that on my video, and who respond in that way when someone brings up, you know, the possibility of a world without money, or a world where money isn't, where financial wealth isn't tied to survival, or your survival isn't tied to your ability to be paid for your labor or whatever. And they say, well, why would anybody do that if they weren't getting paid for it? Well, there are lots of examples of people doing stuff that they don't have to do, that they aren't paid for, but they want to do it, and they do the best job they can at it for reasons other than money. Like those situations already exist. And I think some people just need to be reminded of that. You know, I don't pretend that will do it for everybody, but I think in a lot of cases, they just haven't thought about it. They just haven't thought, like, actually, no, there are probably things that I do in my life that I don't get paid a dime for, that are important to me and that I try to do my best at. Next one is from Joe McClory. I am glad that you also liked what Johnson did with Luke. Not only is it a good character move, but it fits in well with what they seem to be doing with the Force. That is not just about great men and destiny, but doing the right, even when you have flaws, even when you make mistakes, and everyone having the power to make a difference. Would you be willing to spend a bit of time gushing about other good choices that Rian Johnson made for The Last Jedi that some people don't like? Rey's parents not being anyone, Snoke being killed without even explaining who he was, Poe being shamed and learning how to be a leader instead of just a hotshot hero. The more I think about this movie and watch it, the more I think it might not only be as good as Empire, but better. We are certainly on the same boat when it comes to The Last Jedi. Yeah, I thought all of those decisions that you just listed in your question were great choices that worked out great for the movie. And yeah, those are the things that people who didn't like the movie complain about. Oh, we never found out who Snoke was, or Snoke was killed as an afterthought, or Rey's parents wound up not being important. Like that scene where Rey is told that her parents were nobody, when Kylo says, your parents are nobody, they come from nothing. That is one of the best scenes in the movie. Like, that's one of the best scenes in the movie. I love that scene. That scene gave me a thrill when I was watching it in the theater. It was magnetic. I loved that scene. And I loved that reveal. I loved the fact that the mystery of who Rey's parents were is that they weren't anybody. And yeah, that goes along with the larger theme of that movie in particular, and so far of what seems to be the theme for this sequel trilogy. And hopefully that theme is continued in the last episode, which is, yeah, the Force is not about dynasties. The Force is not about bloodlines. The Force is not about Skywalkers and that's it, or Jedi and Sith, and that's it. The Force is a natural resource. The Force is something that lots of people can access and manipulate and benefit from. It's the democratizing of the Force. That seems to be one of the big projects of this trilogy. And what better way to drive that theme home than to have the villain say to the hero, your parents were nobody. And then the hero still wins in the end. Like Rey still saves the day. She still masters the Force and lifts up the rocks and allows the rebels to escape. And she still is able to be a hero. It doesn't matter who her parents were. It matters who she is. What a great message, period. What a great moral for people in the audience to hear. It doesn't matter who your parents were. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what your heritage is nearly as much as it matters who you are. You don't have to be defined by your parents. You don't have to be defined by your heritage or your bloodlines. You can be defined by who you are, who you choose to be right now in this life that you have. What a great message. And what a great way of putting across that theme. So I thought that was tremendous. And I thought Snoke getting killed was great. The thing I liked about that, what the feeling I came away from the movie with that was so thrilling to me after I left the theater after seeing it for the first time, I thought, my God, they've wrapped up everything that I thought they were going to stretch out to the third movie. Like all of these plot points that I thought for sure they were going to leave open for the third movie. They've wrapped it all up. What are they going to do for the third one? And it was an excitement. It was like, oh, I can't wait to see what happens. And I'm perfectly willing to admit that the third movie might not be anything worth waiting for. Like the third movie might turn out to be a dud. I might watch it and go, oh, Jesus, all the promise, all the potential that was there after The Last Jedi was just completely pissed away. Like, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope the third movie is great, but it could be a piece of shit. But the feeling that I had after leaving Last Jedi was, oh my God, it's a complete blank page. I have no idea what happens next. And that was incredibly exciting. So yeah, I thought The Last Jedi was a great movie, and I thought all of those controversial choices that a lot of people thought were terrible were actually great, and made for a very exciting movie, and made me even more interested and excited for where it goes after that. Next question is from John Gingras. Okay, let's play Date, Mate, Assimilate. And I will take these, actually, I'll read through them real quick, and then I'll go through them one at a time. So here are some randomly picked sets. What are your choices? Okay, and now let's see here. My choice for the first one is Vic Fontaine, Jet Reno, and Savick. Date, Mate, Assimilate. I will date Vic Fontaine, I will mate Savick, and I will assimilate Jet Reno. How about that? I can't assimilate Jet, though. Jet's cool. I'll assimilate Vic Fontaine. And I'll date Jet, I'll mate Savick, and I'll assimilate Vic Fontaine. Because what does Vic have to fear anyway? Like, Vic's a hologram. What are the Borg going to do to him? The next one is Malcolm Reed, Keiko O'Brien, and James T. Kirk. I would assimilate Reed, date Keiko, and mate Kirk. Mating is Kirk's thing, right? And Keiko, that's another pet peeve of mine for Star Trek fans. All the people that hate Keiko. I thought Keiko was great. I thought Keiko was a terrific character. So I would date Keiko, mate Kirk, and assimilate Reed. The next one is Michael Burnham, Chakotay, and Boothby. I would assimilate Boothby because he's going to live forever anyway. So, assimilate Boothby so he can go tend garden on some Borg cube somewhere. Yeah. Mate Chakotay because you just want to get that over with as quickly as possible. I don't think I could stand dating him. He's just, God, he's so dull. And date Michael Burnham because not only is she great and beautiful, but life would never be boring. You know what I'm saying? And plus, if I'm dating her, I'm in the 30th century with the 32nd century, whatever they went to at the end of season 2. So I get to see the future. And finally, this is a good one. Jadzia Dax, Captain Pike, and T'Pol. Oh man. Oh, boy. Mate Jadzia, date Pike, assimilate T'Pol. Sometimes there are no good decisions. Actually, but T'Pol, of those three characters, T'Pol is by far my least favorite of them. So I mean, it doesn't hurt my feelings too much to assimilate her. But nothing against T'Pol. I have no particular issues with her. But a choice has to be made. Next is from Ask and Tell Project. What conventions or events will you be attending? When can we meet up for coffee? At the moment, I have no plans to attend any conventions or events. I don't know of any in this immediate area that I intend to go to. Actually, a couple weeks ago, Callie messaged me, Callie Wright, and proposed that I go to Star Trek Las Vegas next year, because she said this is so much fun, and going to Star Trek Vegas with you would be such a ton of fun. And I'm thinking maybe if I can afford it, I might go to Star Trek Vegas next year. I'm not saying I'm doing it. I'm not saying it's definite. But I am thinking about it. If it is financially feasible, I think I might want to take Callie up on that offer and go to Star Trek Vegas next year, which would be almost a year from now. I think it's the first week of August 2020 is next year's Star Trek Vegas. So thinking about that. But other than that, I know I have no plans to go to any events or rallies or cons or whatever. But if you want to meet for coffee sometime, I would love to. We're in the same general geographic area, so message me sometime, and if you're available someday and I'm available someday, and you want to meet and have coffee and hang out or something, I would be completely willing to do that. I would love to do that. Next one is this is the last one from Danny K. Hey, Steve, hope you're doing well. I meant to respond to the original Trekonomics video with this, but didn't get around to it. In the DS9 episode, Honor Among Thieves, where Chief O'Brien infiltrates the Orion Syndicate a la Donnie Brasco, the Chief wins the trust of the gangsters by helping them rob the Bank of Boleus. Does it strike you as odd that a Federation member planet as prominent as Boleus would still maintain its own central bank when the UFP at large is supposed to not use currency? I guess that depends on how much of a stickler you are for consistency and continuity in Star Trek, which, as you may know, in my case, I am not that much of a stickler for it. I think we've seen other examples of Federation member planets doing things that are not done by the Federation as a whole. I think Vulcan might be an example where we know that there are still such things as Vulcan ships, like the planet Vulcan still has Vulcan ships in addition to Vulcan being a part of the Federation and supporting Starfleet and that fleet. So maybe just as Vulcan still maintains its own Vulcan fleet of starships, maybe Boleus has a currency or at least maintains a bank where other civilizations, other people, I guess, can keep their currency or keep their assets. So I don't think it's necessarily all that unusual. But even if it is, even if it doesn't make sense, if it's an inconsistency or an incongruity like that kind of thing doesn't really bother me. I mean, and actually in certain ways, not in every way, but in certain ways, little details like that may or may not break the world, I think are kind of fun. Like, I don't mind as long as it's in the background, it's not like in my face. I don't mind little details like that kind of remind me that it's a fictional world. I think it breaks the illusion and it ruins the verisimilitude if you're making something that depends on me having suspension of disbelief, but you're constantly shattering that suspension of disbelief. But I think little details like that are actually kind of fun, So no, I don't think the Bank of Boleus thing is that big of a deal. Okay, that was the last patron question. I am now going to turn to you wonderful people who are still with me in the live chat. I presume there are still a few of you there. So does anybody in the live chat right now, if you've been sitting on a question the whole time and you're waiting for me to answer, please answer your questions now. And I'm going to try to keep up. So Some Random Geek says, what do you know about gift economy and why would it be awesome, especially in a moneyless communist society? I actually, surprisingly, I'm being sarcastic, I don't think I know anything about it. So you feel free to educate me at some point. Secular Scholar says, I remember an old quip, soon men will do what they will and who will till the fields. the slaves, but through automation slavery, aren't we already approaching Advent anyway? Automaton slavery, I should say. Yeah, I guess. That's one of the last humps to sort of getting us to the point where we can have the Star Trek economy, right? Having an automation and artificial intelligence to the point where a lot of what are considered the menial jobs or the unattractive, unsavory jobs will be done by robots or computers, and then we won't have to worry about it so much. Jess Willie, who would win in a fight, Batman or Nancy Drew? Batman, but it would be interesting because I think Batman is enough of a gentleman that he wouldn't want to hit a girl as young as Nancy Drew. Like he'll throw he'll throw hands with a grown woman who knows how to take care of herself, like Catwoman or Lady Shiva. But a teenager who's just a detective and not necessarily a master of the fighting arts like Nancy Drew, I think Batman would probably just try to tie her up or sort of put her off, But I don't think he would like just deck her. But it might be interesting to watch. John Burns, Steve, so is a beer better than a soda for losing weight? I have no idea. I am not a dietitian. I have no idea. I would suppose that beer has a lot of calories, so probably not. Soda has a lot of calories too, but the calories in soda are mostly from sugar. But I don't know. I would suggest a light beer if you want to have a beer, but you also want to lose weight. I would suggest a light beer and practice moderation. Don't drink a beer like all the time. Here's another one from some random geek. How do you take your coffee? Best coffee you had? Are you drinking Irish coffee today? I take my coffee black. Best coffee I ever had. I'm not really a coffee snob, so I think the coffee at like Burger King or Sheetz or something is completely fine. Right now I drink just a generic grocery store brand, but it's Colombian brew, so it's relatively dark. But yeah, I drink it black, and no, it is not Irish coffee. It is alcohol free. Nathaniel Robinson, Steve, from your Warhammer answer, you don't little about tabletop games. Would there be a faction, fiction, or history you would bring to the table? Roman army, RAF? I don't know anything about it. Yeah, you're right. I don't know any. The only tabletop game even close to that sort of thing that I've ever played is Risk. So I've never. Yeah, I'm completely out of my depth on that question. Plasma Burn Death. Hi, Steve. Did you see my email/comment on 2,400 Columbine trespassers hoplophiles since 1999 and why they are not on terror lists and red flag? And did you have a chance to check out that song? LOL. Yes and no. I did see the email. I did read the email. I don't think I've had a chance to check out the song yet. I'm sorry for that. Hunter 1981, Steve, I want to see your shirt off. Well, and go back through my back catalog of videos because there are a couple of videos where I do have my shirt off. And I can't promise that I won't do it again at some point. Liam Foley in the TOS episode The Apple, wasn't Spock mentioning his salary when answering Kirk's question how much Spock is worth to Starfleet after he was injured? Yes, and Kirk, I think there's also a couple of instances in TOS where Kirk, I think he says to Scotty at one point, you earned your pay this week. You can either assume that they still have money at that point, that the transition to the moneyless economy hasn't happened yet, or you can assume that Kirk is just speaking figuratively. He's saying you earned your pay this week, Scotty, and really he doesn't mean literal pay. Just like when I'm talking about an issue that I don't know very much about and I'm not comfortable stating a confident opinion, I'll say, that's above my pay grade. Not literally, but it's just an expression. Here's a super chat from John Burns. McCoy and Spock arguing the Genesis device. Humanism versus logic. Spock is unemotional. It's a part of who he is. McCoy's horrified because a doctor after the genetics wars considers Genesis the genetics wars by other means. McCoy is the passionate one, and McCoy is the one who views the Genesis device as he says in the movie. It's universal Armageddon. It's humanity having a power that he doesn't believe humanity can be trusted with. And as a doctor and as someone who perhaps as a physician has strong opinions on the eugenics wars and things like that, and having met Khan and having, run into Khan during that adventure, yeah, he probably has very strong feelings about it. Sure. Joe McClory, favorite robot in fiction. Probably Data or Robbie the Robot from, Forbidden Planet. Yeah. A Trance, have you seen the Netflix exclusive Another Life? No. Eddie Stone, is Michael Burnham a Mary Sue, or is she just a powerful woman people are keen to dismiss? It's the second one. No, I don't think she is a Mary Sue. I think a lot of the problems that people have with her have to do with the fact that she's a woman and the fact that she is a person of color and the fact that she is written to have an attitude that is unapologetic and confident and strong and being a badass ass kicker. Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. Here's another super chat from John Burns. Thank you again. Steve, I'm heading to TwitchCon in San Diego next month. One of the reasons why is that the best streams that I follow are those with chats that feel like a community, and that helps my mental health as well. I hope others. Well, and I hope that this is one of those for you as well. I hope that the live chats during my live streams are something like that for you too. Hopefully they're not too shitty or you wouldn't be here. Yannick Muller says, I just finished Twin Peaks The Return for the third time. Important questions you need to answer. Is it future or is it past? Also, got a light? Seriously, though, what is your favorite Lynch movie? It seems to be the past, doesn't it? I mean, I know there's futures. Maybe it is the future, but I think I assumed at the end there that it was the past. But I would have to go back and watch it. I've only watched it once, so I'm not sure. And my favorite Lynch movie is, what is my favorite Lynch movie? God, that's such a tough question. I really like Mulholland Drive. And Some Random Geek wants everybody to be reminded of the charity links down below in the description. Yes, absolutely. Please be mindful of those and contribute to those or share them around if you can, because there's some of our friends who really need help. Daryl Lett says, Steve, do you have a favorite joke about sexism? Mine goes, I was watching Hillary give a speech about hating the way men rate women 1 to 10, and I thought Hillary no longer thinks Bill's a 10 anymore. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but if anybody has any good jokes that are not sexist jokes, but are jokes about sexism, please feel free to share them in the chat. Jamie J. So based on your Batman interpretation, would Batman punch me? Well, that depends. I'm not sure how old you are, and I'm not sure how good of a badass fighter you are. If you can take care of yourself in a fight, if you're like an ass kicker and you come at Batman throwing hands and he's like, oh shit, I gotta defend myself, then maybe he would. I don't know, but I'm not sure. Haven't seen you in action. Core 409, I would have loved to see the Dominion fight the Borg. Thoughts? Yeah, if there was a story, if there was a reason for it, yeah, the idea of the Dominion versus the Borg is potentially intriguing, but I would want there to be a story behind it, not just let's, smash the ships into each other. Sure. Some Random Geek says, question, if you never had to worry about money, what would you spend most of your time doing? Basically the same thing that I do now, but just maybe with a more relaxed schedule, and I would feel a little bit more at liberty to make videos about things that I don't make them about right now. You know what I mean? Like I would definitely still do Steve and Stuffy videos. I would definitely still do Star Trek videos because I genuinely love that stuff. I would basically do the same stuff that I do now. I just wouldn't feel under as much pressure to do it in order to make money, to pay bills so that I don't die. But it's one of the nice things about my life right now. Like I'm basically doing what I want to do, excuse me, including belching on the air, which is nice. Let me see here. Sean Hartley, thoughts on Nerdrotic's hate campaign against CBS and Disco because of the supposed ripoff of ideas used in Disco. Is Nerdrotic the one? Are they the ones that made the game that the tardigrade was supposedly ripped off from, or is that something different? I'm not entirely clear on what that is. David Colby, would it be a literal crime to put links to my books and my questions? No, I would be happy to share links to your books, David. Yeah, please feel free, and if put a link to it in your question, and I will be happy to share it on the stream. Joe McClure, what's the worst joke that always makes you laugh? Oh God, you asked me too fast. I can't think of one right now. I'm sorry. I tell you, there are certain types of joke that always make me laugh, like when you set up, like I'm never doing that, and then it cuts to the person actually doing the thing that they never said they were good. Like there's something about that makes me laugh every single time. What else? Like, I don't know, the window falling on Ernest P. Worrell's fingers. I laugh at that every time. A trance. An Enterprise, time traveler crewman Daniels mentions that the Klingons eventually joined the Federation. What's your opinion of this? I would have thought that the Klingons would be too proud to join. I don't know. I think they'll join. I don't think that's that far-fetched. Some Random Geek asks, what are you going to do for your Patreon Hangouts now that Google Hangouts isn't a thing? Yes, this is of a particular significance because this weekend is this month's Patreon Hangout. And yeah, Google Hangouts is no more. So my intention for, at least for this month, and hopefully if it works out for months going forward, is we are going to do it using Lightstream, which is a streaming video platform that is not quite as good or as convenient as Google Hangouts was, but it allows me to have multiple people on at the same time. It allows me to easily stream directly from the website to my YouTube channel, so people will be able to watch them as we do it with no hassle, just like, and I won't have to use an encoder like XSplit, like I do for this. So yeah, the only downside is Google Hangouts, you could have 10 people on the air at once. And with Lightstream, I think you can only have 8 on the air at once, including me. So fewer people will be able to be in the room at the same time. But other than that, it seems like a pretty good option. So we're going to do it on Lightstream, at least for the time being. We'll see how it works out. Okay. This is usually the time where I'll wrap things up, but I want to just go through the chat real quick and see if there's any questions that I missed that I have something to say about, and then we'll wrap this up. Daniel Pucci says, what do you think of the uniforms for disco, both the standard and the disco 1701 jazzed up style? I love them both. I wasn't a huge fan of the Discovery uniforms at first, but they really grew on me, and now I really, really like them. And yeah, those the Discovery versions of the Enterprise uniforms are some of my favorite Star Trek uniforms ever. I think I've mentioned before in videos that I'm a little bit of a Star Trek uniform nerd, and those Discovery Enterprise uniforms with the bright colored tops, oh my God, I love those. Those are so great. I absolutely adore those. Robert Mills, would it really take World War III, or will we let our better nature rule? I hope it doesn't take World War III, but, you know, our history seems to suggest that we need to be kicked in the teeth before we do the thing we should have been doing all along. Ranter Matt says, ever notice that despite Star Trek's stance on religious neutrality, they do seem to have a lot of supernatural beings with godlike capabilities throughout the shows? Yeah, that does seem to happen a lot, doesn't it? Aid Trance, do you think we'll have a moneyless society sometime in the future? Maybe. I don't know. Not in my lifetime, but maybe at some point in the future. I think eventually we'll probably reach a point where we don't have a choice. Here's another super chat from John Burns. Thank you again, my friend. I admit that I will miss these videos next month, Steve. Shives, new viewer, $5 super chat earlier. Well, thank you. I appreciate the preemptive super chat. Nathaniel Robinson, have you thought about addressing non-Christian theology in your videos? I thought about it a little bit when I was still doing the Atheist Reads videos, but I could never find a good enough text that I thought would work. And now that I don't do as much atheist-focused content, I haven't really thought about it that much. But I'm not opposed to the idea. I just don't know if and when I'm going to do it. Hunter 1981, Steve, what's your thoughts about Sheldon's Spockumentary on the Big Bang Theory? I've never watched a single moment of the Big Bang Theory. Okay, Nathan, yes, Bender is a good robot. Bender is a good choice. Oh, hey, Jason's here, and I didn't even notice him until now because I'm so behind on the chat. He says, hey, Steve, it's me, that jerk who regularly tortures you. When in the name of all that is normal and natural will you finally fly in an airplane and maybe visit a friend on the West Coast? Hey, you know what? If I do end up, I don't know if you saw this or not, but earlier I mused about perhaps going to Star Trek Vegas next year. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but if I do, and I'm like 3/4 of the way there, I mean, maybe I'll hop over. And I'll just turn up at your door with a suitcase. And I'll be like, hey, boy, hotels around here are expensive. Got a couch? Yeah, it's possible, sure. I would love to. I would love to. A-Trance, do you think humans will have warp drive or some form of faster than light travel this century? No. I hope I'm wrong, but do I think we'll have faster than light travel this century? No, I definitely don't think we will. Plasma Burn Death, quick question. Do you think Picard and Enterprise would have done better than Janeway in the Delta Quadrant, considering how unstable life support was with minutes of air left? Yeah, I mean, I think Picard would have done fine. I don't know if he would have done better or worse, but yeah, I mean, it's not like life wasn't fraught on the Enterprise on a weekly basis. Some random geek question. Should capitalism and the state be dismantled? I guess. Maybe. Sure. Hey, Dana, what are your thoughts at the end of season 2 for Handmaid? Just finished, and I saw your message, by the way. Dana and I go way back. Oh boy, I was very frustrated by the end of season 2 of Handmaid's Tale, and hopefully we can talk about this privately a little bit after this is over. But I was so super frustrated by the end of Handmaid's Tale, like. Specifically with June. I understand why June made the decision she made. Like, I understand feeling loyalty for her daughter and not wanting to leave her daughter in Gilead. But, I mean, think of all the people who put their asses on the line to try to get her out. And then she decides at the last second to stay. I think, when you'll have to watch season 3 and decide for yourself. Like, how you thought season 3 went. But for me personally, that end of season 2 and June making that decision to stay, I remember watching that for the first time and going like, oh God, like June almost lost me there. June almost lost me there as a character. I almost was like, oh, to hell with this, because I was like, ugh. So I found it very frustrating, and I'm really curious to know what you thought of it. But yes, I found it to be a very, very frustrating ending and a very frustrating character move for June. Jason has 2 couches. Look at that, so I can bring a friend. Andrew Priest says, last Ask Away, I used a slur that you said you don't use anymore. I didn't realize that at the time, but now I think I do. I also no longer use that term now, thanks to you. Oh, that's great. Well, that's really good to hear. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a big deal. Like, I know a lot of people still use it, and they don't use it necessarily in, like, they don't think of it as a slur when they use it, but I just try not to say that word anymore. So, but yeah, if you decided not to use it anymore too, good for you. That's great. Game Lore says, what's in your pockets? Just right now, just my keys and my wallet. And if I'm standing up and moving around, I have my phone in my pocket, but it's not obviously in my pocket right now. Let's see. Friend, not wife. If my wife wants to come with me to Nevada and then perhaps to California, she's welcome to. But I don't know if she will. I'll have to bring a friend. Yeah, I'll have to bring Dana. Do you want to come to? Do you want to take a trip with me to Nevada and California? If I go. Jamie J says, Steve, have you ever been mellow? Or you mean just generally? Like, have you ever just been in a mellow mood? Yes, of course. Most of the time, actually. I'm a very mellow fellow. If you mean something else by that, I have no idea what you could possibly mean. Yeah, okay. I'm going to, we've gone a few minutes over, but I think I actually made it all the way through the chat and answered all the questions. So I'm going to take the live chat off the screen right now, so I'm not tempted to continue answering questions. Oh, look, as soon as I take it off, I get a super chat from Sean. Thank you, Sean, and your timing is impeccable. Do you think that evolution would work the same way on another planet, allowing bipedal, upright humanoids to become the dominant form of life? Not necessarily. There's no reason to assume that natural selection would favor that particular arrangement on another planet the same way it does now. So not necessarily. Okay, now that's the last question I'm going to answer. So thank you, Sean. Thank you so much, Sean, for the super chat. As always, I want to remind everybody that if you like what I do, you can become a supporter on Patreon by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives. One of the benefits of being a patron at any level is that you can submit questions ahead of time that I will make sure to answer during the show. I also want to remind you, especially since Jason stopped by in the chat. I don't know if you're still here or not, Jason, but I also co-host a couple of podcasts with the great Jason Harding, a.k.a. Jason with a D of Opinionville, who is also making Opinionville videos once again, which is awesome to see. You should all go subscribe to Opinionville on YouTube if you're not watching Opinionville. We co-host a couple of podcasts together on the Let Me Listen podcast network. We co-host Late Seating, which is the movie review podcast, where we we take a look at classic films and decide whether or not they deserve whatever reputation they have, be it good or bad. And we also co-host the Ensign's Log, which is a Star Trek-themed comedy podcast. And if you dig the Star Trek videos that I do on this YouTube channel, and you haven't been listening to the Ensign's Log, you should check out the Ensign's Log because we really love it. It's one of my favorite things that I do, and a lot of people who listen to it seem to like it too. So if you dig funny Star Trek stuff and you think I'm funny and you think Jason is funny, then you should listen to our podcast. So please do if you're not doing it already. So that's it, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks to everybody for joining me. Thanks for all the questions. There's another super chat from John. Thank you so much for your generosity. And this one says, I'm never going to get out of this goddamn live stream. John says, because of climate change, will the population be reduced to millions around the world by 2035? No, I think that's a little early. I don't think it'll be that bad that soon. Okay, thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks to everybody for the questions, especially for those of you who are kind enough to submit super chats. I appreciate your generosity and your support so much. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. And I'll see you this weekend for the Patreon hangout as well. We're going to try something with Lightstream and see if that works. So thanks, everybody. And look, my watch band is off. Look at this. It's all just going completely to shit in the last few seconds, isn't it? Bye, everybody.